Have you ever found yourself just caught in that relentless cycle? You know the one. You're constantly busy, your calendar's just bursting at the seams.
Yeah, totally overflowing.
Right. Rushing from one thing to the next, trying desperately to please everyone around you, your boss, your colleagues, family, friends.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Exactly. And then you hit the end of the day, you're utterly drained, and you have this sinking feeling. You realize you've made little, maybe no meaningful progress on the things that really, truly matter to you.
Mm-hmm. It's that horrible feeling of spinning your wheels.
It really is. It feels like you're majoring in minor activities, as the saying goes, just stuck in this overwhelming, stressful, and honestly deeply unsatisfying loop.
So true.
And if that feeling resonates with you at all, well, you are absolutely in the right place today. Because let's be honest, we've all been there.
Oh, definitely. And it's more than just a feeling, isn't it? It feels like a, well, pervasive modern condition.
Yeah, how so?
We're just bombarded constantly with this endless stream of opportunities, requests, demands. Everything's coming at you, and it becomes incredibly easy to get swept up in that current.
You lose sight of things.
You lose sight of your core purpose, your true priorities. The default just becomes yes to everything. And before you know it, you're kind of adrift.
Totally adrift. And that's precisely why today we're taking a deep dive into a book that offers not just like an escape hatch, but a really revolutionary pathway out of this exact cycle.
Okay, let's hear it.
We're talking about Greg McKeown's Essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less. And honestly, it's much more than just another self-help book. It feels like a profound shift in how we approach our lives and our work.
That's really well put.
Yeah.
Because this isn't another book packed with productivity hacks, or tips on how to cram even more into your already packed schedule.
Right. None of that.
Instead, McKeown fundamentally challenges the very premise that more is better. His core philosophy, it's all about cultivating this disciplined skill, and it is a skill of discerning the vital few from the trivial many.
The noise.
Exactly, the noise. And then comes the even harder part, actually. It requires having the courage, and it genuinely takes courage, to systematically eliminate the non-essential stuff.
Getting rid of it.
Getting rid of it so you can channel your precious energy and time into making the highest possible contribution you can make.
I think that's the phrase that really clicked for me. It's not about doing more, it's about doing less but better.
Less but better. That's the mantra.
It really is. It's all about intentionality. And this deep dive, it's really tailored for anyone out there who feels perpetually spread too thin.
Which is probably a lot of us.
I think so. Or for those, intelligent, ambitious individuals who perhaps, ironically, find themselves kind of trapped by their own success. Or even just for those who are curious about a fundamentally different way to approach work and life. Our mission here is really to help you gain that knowledge quickly, thoroughly, but without that feeling of information overload that so often comes with exploring these big, complex ideas.
And it's a journey well worth taking, believe me. This philosophy, it can genuinely transform how you live, how you approach your work, how you connect with other people. It's packed with surprising facts, some really counterintuitive insights, and actually incredibly practical steps you can start implementing, like right away, to reclaim your time and your focus.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this. So a first question has to be, why? Why do we get stuck in the cycle in the first place? Why do we fall into what the book calls the non-essentialist trap? It feels so common, almost, inevitable sometimes.
It is incredibly common, and the way McKeown opens the book, he makes it immediately relatable. He starts with this very personal and, by his own admission, quite shameful anecdote that just sets the stage perfectly. He describes visiting his wife, Anna, in the hospital the day after their daughter was born. Now, you'd think, right, this would be one of the purest, most joyful moments, a time to be fully present.
Absolutely. New baby, new family dynamic starting.
Exactly. But instead, he's constantly on his phone, checking emails, feeling this immense external pressure. He actually had a colleague who had joked kind of pointedly, Friday between 1 and 2 would be a bad time to have a baby because I need you to be at this meeting with X.
Wow, that's intense.
Right. And McKeown knew, deep down, he absolutely should be there with his wife and newborn. He even recalls his wife's face, that expectant look, silently pleading with him to stay.
Oh, heartbreaking.
Yet, when his colleague actually asked if he'd attend that meeting, he heard himself saying, with all the conviction he could apparently muster in that moment, yes.
Oh, no, he didn't.
He did. And to his profound shame and later deep regret, He left his wife and his hours-old baby daughter to attend this meeting. And his colleague, trying to make it okay, even told him, "The client will respect you for making the decision to be here." But McKeown said he looked at the client's faces, and he just saw a mirror of how he felt. This look of confusion, maybe even disapproval.
Like, what are you doing here?
Exactly. What was I doing there, he thought. He'd said yes, simply to please, right, to fulfill some external expectation. And in doing that, he deeply hurt his family, he compromised his own integrity, and honestly, he even created this awkwardness in the client relationship itself.
And here's the kicker, right?
Yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting and frankly just tragic in its irony.
What happened?
As it turned out, exactly nothing came of that client meeting. It yielded absolutely zero results. It was completely, utterly non-essential.
Wow. All that sacrifice for nothing.
Precisely.
And you see, this anecdote isn't just some personal story he's sharing. It highlights this profound, almost universal truth. It exposes that instinctive, deeply ingrained pull so many of us feel to just say yes.
Why do we do that?
Well, we do it to please others, maybe to appear competent, sometimes just to avoid conflict, or maybe simply because it feels easier in the moment than saying no. But so often, it goes directly against our deeply held values, our real priorities. And that feeling of regret that follows, and the slow, kind of insidious damage it does to our personal integrity, and even to our most important relationships when these sacrifices are made by default, rather than by conscious, deliberate design. It's a powerful, often hidden cost.
It makes you wonder.
It really does. It begs the question, how often do we make similar compromises in our own lives, neglecting what truly matters for these trivial commitments that ultimately yield nothing? It's a pattern that can become this self-fulfilling prophecy of just overwhelm.
It's a deeply sobering thought, and it leads us directly into what McKeown calls the paradox of success, which sounds incredibly counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does.
Success itself, the very thing we're all striving for, can actually become a catalyst for failure. That's a concept that really makes you pause and think.
It absolutely does, because we're generally taught that more success just leads to more good things, right? But McKeown outlines these 4 predictable phases that illustrate how this cycle unfolds, often without us even realizing it's happening.
Okay, what are they?
So phase 1 is where it all begins. You have clarity of purpose, you're focused, you know what you're good at, and that clarity naturally leads to success.
Yeah.
This is the sweet spot, right?
Yeah, things are clicked.
You're making progress, you're getting recognized, everything feels aligned, you're in the zone.
But then phase 2 kicks in, and this is where the trap subtly begins to set itself.
Uh-oh.
Because of that initial success, you start getting more opportunities, more requests, more demands on your time and your expertise. People see your good work, and naturally, they want a piece of it.
Right, your network expands, your inbox explodes.
Your phone starts ringing off the hook. It feels good initially.
But this is where the waters start to get muddy. Phase 3. These new options, which seem positive and flattering on the surface, they unintentionally start to distract you, to tempt you away from the very focus and clarity that made you successful in the first place.
Ah, okay.
You start saying yes to too many of these requests, often without really evaluating them against your original purpose. You think, oh, I can handle it, or this could lead to something good, or maybe just, I don't want to disappoint anyone.
So you find yourself constantly rushing, trying to juggle everything.
Trying to please everyone, get it all done. And that inevitably leads directly to phase 4, which is the final kind of crushing blow to your effectiveness.
What happens then?
Your initial clarity just becomes hopelessly clouded. You're spread so thin across so many different initiatives, making, as the book beautifully describes it, a millimeter of progress in a million directions.
Wow, that paints a picture.
Doesn't it? Your stress levels just skyrocket, the quality of your work invariably declines, and you end up feeling completely exhausted and unfulfilled. You're truly back to majoring in minor activities.
And the work becomes unsatisfying for you and probably frustrating for the people you were trying to please in the first place.
Exactly. It's a vicious circle. McKeown argues, maybe a bit of deliberate overstatement, but argues nonetheless that the undisciplined pursuit of success, of more, can indeed be a direct catalyst for failure.
Because it undermines the focus that got you there.
It fundamentally undermines the very focus and discipline that created the success initially. And this concept is just incredibly counterintuitive because it challenges that deeply ingrained conventional wisdom that more opportunities, more projects, more clients, more activities are always better. We're taught to chase every open door.
It really does challenge that. And it immediately makes me think of Jim Collins' work, right? In How the Mighty Fall, which McKeown references.
Yes. Collins found that for so many companies that were once Wall Street darlings but later just collapsed, the undisciplined pursuit of more was a key recurring reason for their demise.
And what's true for huge corporations.
It often holds just as true, if not more so, for individuals navigating their careers and their personal lives.
Yeah.
Precisely. It's a universal pattern. This isn't just abstract theory. It's a pattern many intelligent, ambitious, well-intentioned people fall straight into. And it prompts a crucial reflection for each of us listening. Where in your own life have your past successes perhaps unintentionally led to your current overwhelm or that feeling of diffused focus?
That's a powerful question.
It is, because it points to this insidious trap. The very qualities that brought you initial success can, if you leave them unchecked, become the very reason you get stuck later on.
Okay, so if the non-essentialist trap is all about getting stuck doing more and more, then the logical answer, the core philosophy of essentialism, must be that phrase again: less but better.
It sounds deceptively simple, but you feel like there's real power packed in there. There absolutely is. And the book brings this core idea to life beautifully through the story of Dieter Rams, the legendary lead designer at Braun for so many years.
Oh yeah, Braun. Very iconic minimalist design.
Exactly. Rams was a true visionary, driven by this profound understanding that almost everything is noise. Very few things are essential. He saw his entire job as this relentless process of filtering through that overwhelming noise to distill things down, to arrive at the pure essence.
And what's truly fascinating is how early in his career this whole philosophy manifested itself. Like, he was just 24, still basically an assistant.
Right. And he was asked to collaborate on a new record player. Now, the industry norm back then was literally to cover the turntable in a solid wooden lid, often integrating the whole system into a bulky piece of living room furniture, making it almost invisible as a separate device.
Yeah, hiding the tech.
Totally. But Rams and his team, they made an incredibly bold, almost audacious choice for the time. They stripped away all that superfluous cladding. They designed a player with a clear plastic cover on top, revealing the components underneath, and basically nothing else.
That must have looked revolutionary.
Oh, completely. It was so radical, so minimalistic, that people genuinely worried it might bankrupt the company because nobody would dare to buy such a departure from convention. It felt like a terrifying risk.
Imagine the sheer courage that must have taken. To champion eliminating the non-essential, knowing it was met with such strong internal resistance and market skepticism.
You have to admire it. But by the 60s, that elegant minimalist aesthetic, that less is more approach, it gained undeniable traction. It didn't just become a design standard. It set a new industry benchmark that pretty much every other record player started to follow.
It became iconic.
It became iconic simply by stripping away the superfluous and letting the functional essence shine through.
So what's the connection to life and work there?
Well, what's truly fascinating is how that design principle applies directly and profoundly to life and work. It illustrates the invincible power of stripping away the superfluous, the unnecessary, the trivial, not just to reveal clarity, but to make a truly profound and lasting impact.
Finding simplicity on the other side of complexity.
Exactly. Whether it's in a product or project or your life itself, it's about that elegant simplicity.
Okay, so once you truly grasp the power of less but better, the next foundational piece of this essentialist mindset, according to the book, is something we often take for granted: choice.
Ah, yes, choice.
As the brilliant writer Madeleine L'Engle once said, it is the ability to choose which makes us human.
This chapter is, for me, one of the most resonant in the whole book. McKeown shares another really deeply personal revelation that completely shifted his own trajectory.
What happened?
He was halfway through his first year of law school in England, prestigious, demanding path, and he found himself sitting in this high-rise foyer, just utterly drained.
Been there.
Right. And he impulsively decided to do this spontaneous brainstorm. He simply wrote down everything he truly wanted to be doing with his life.
Okay.
And as he looked at that piece of paper, the most striking thing wasn't what was on it, but what wasn't. Law school.
Wow, really?
Yeah. He realized he'd applied mainly because he'd received all this repeated, well-meaning advice from people to keep your options open.
Oh, that classic advice.
The classic advice. And ironically, by trying to keep all his options open, he had actually just drifted into a path that was completely non-essential to his deepest desires. He was halfway through this very expensive, very demanding program, and he was utterly unfulfilled.
That anecdote raises such an important and maybe uncomfortable question for so many of us, doesn't it?
It really does.
How often do we find ourselves on a path that maybe others have subtly chosen for us, or a path we've simply just drifted into, rather than one we've actively, deliberately chosen for ourselves?
Huh. It's a critical question. And the book draws this stark contrast between the non-essentialist and the essentialist approaches to choice. And it's really illuminating.
How does it break down?
The non-essentialist, McKeown explains, tends to live from a place of, I have to. They essentially forfeit their fundamental right to choose. They gradually learn this kind of helplessness, becoming a function of others' demands or societal expectations, or even their own past choices that they now feel trapped by.
They give away their power.
They surrender their inherent power, often without even realizing they possessed it in the first place. It's a very passive existence, just reacting to external forces.
Whereas the essentialist
fundamentally says, I choose to. They actively exercise and celebrate the profound power of choice. They don't give others permission to choose for them. They understand that every single yes is implicitly a no to something else, and they own that decision.
That reminds me of that William James quote.
Yes. My first act of free will shall be to believe in free will.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. It underscores that actively choosing isn't just like a preference. It's a foundational act of self-determination. It's the very bedrock of taking control of your life.
It's the difference between being a pawn and being the player.
Beautifully put. Exactly.
Okay, so once you embrace that power of choice, you then need to develop the crucial skill of discernment, distinguishing the vital few from the trivial many. Because, let's face it, we're constantly seduced by this appealing but ultimately false idea that results directly correlate with effort, More effort equals more results, just work harder.
It seems fair, doesn't it? It's certainly intuitive, but the research across countless fields paints a very different picture. Most people have probably heard of the Pareto principle, right? The 80-20 rule.
Right, 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort, something like that.
Exactly. It was introduced by the Italian economist Alfredo Pareto way back in the 1790s when he observed that 20% of the pea pods in his garden produced 80% of the peas. Simple observation.
Huh, peas.
Yeah. And then he applied this to land ownership, finding that roughly 20% of the people owned 80% of the land in Italy. The core idea is that a small fraction of what you do, or a small percentage of inputs, yields the vast majority of your impact or outputs.
So if you apply that to, say, your work,
it could mean 20% of your tasks deliver 80% of your actual results. Or maybe 20% of your clients bring in 80% of your revenue. It's a really powerful revelation when you start looking for it.
And wasn't there someone else who expanded on this? Juran?
Yes. Joseph Moses Juran, one of the fathers of the whole quality management movement. He expanded on this in 1951, calling it the law of the vital few. He observed that you could massively improve the quality of a product or a system by identifying and resolving just a tiny fraction of the problems.
Instead of trying to fix everything.
Exactly. You focus on the handful of issues that cause the most widespread impact. Don't boil the ocean.
And what's truly fascinating here is how Japan actually adopted this very principle. At the time, remember, Made in Japan had a pretty poor reputation, right? Low cost, low quality goods.
Yeah, definitely.
But by deliberately adopting Juran's process, channeling a high percentage of effort and attention toward improving just those few things that were truly vital to quality, rather than trying to fix every single minor defect, they systematically transformed their entire reputation.
That quality revolution.
Rooted in this principle of discernment, it gradually led to Japan's astonishing rise as a global economic powerhouse. It wasn't about doing more, it was about doing the right things, profoundly well.
And this principle isn't just for countries or massive corporations. It applies to every kind of human endeavor, big or small. Consider someone like Warren Buffett, the legendary investor. He famously said, "Our investment philosophy borders on lethargy."
Lethargy, that's probably the last word you'd expect from one of the world's most successful investors. It sounds totally contradictory.
It absolutely does, but it's deeply essentialist. What he means is that he and his firm, Berkshire Hathaway, make relatively few investments, and they hold on to them for a very long time. In the Tao of Warren Buffett, it's explained that he decided early on it would be utterly impossible to make hundreds of right investment decisions. So his strategy became invest only in businesses he was absolutely sure of, businesses he deeply understood, and then, crucially, bet heavily on those few.
And it paid off.
Massively. He famously attributes something like 90% of his immense wealth to just 10 key investments over his entire career. He is the epitome of finding the vital few.
Wow. Sometimes what you don't do is just as important as what you do. That's a powerful quote. A quiet truth that gets lost in our culture of just constant activity.
It truly is. And the contrast here between the non-essentialist and the essentialist is stark. The non-essentialist tends to believe that almost everything is equally essential. They view all opportunities as basically equal. They just scatter their energy widely.
Like a shotgun approach.
Exactly. Whereas the essentialist operates from the deep conviction that almost everything is non-essential. They rigorously, almost ruthlessly, distinguish the vital few from the trivial many. They apply immense selectivity.
So it's about being incredibly selective, maybe even unreasonably so, to ensure that the few things you do commit to are truly impactful.
Yes. And that upfront investment in discernment, that thoughtful process of evaluation, it's always justified in the long run. Because when you find those few truly vital things, they repay the effort tenfold, 20-fold, sometimes even 80-fold.
It's a skill you can develop.
Absolutely. This skill of discernment, this ability to filter, it can start simply in your daily decisions. And once it becomes more second nature, a habit, you can begin to apply it to bigger, broader, more complex areas of your personal and professional life. It definitely requires a massive shift in thinking, no doubt, but it's a muscle that can absolutely be developed.
Okay, moving on from the mindset then. Once you've discerned those vital few things, you have to be ready to take decisive action. And that means inevitably making deliberate trade-offs.
The trade-offs.
Yeah.
The hard part.
The book makes it crystal clear. Saying yes to any single opportunity, no matter how small or appealing it seems, inherently means saying no to countless others. This isn't just theoretical. It's a fundamental reality that we often conveniently ignore or try to sidestep.
It's the brutal truth of finite resources, isn't it? Finite time, finite energy. And the example of Southwest Airlines brings this reality to life in a business context with startling clarity.
Right, the airline industry. Notoriously unprofitable, a graveyard of failed ventures.
Exactly. Yet Southwest, under the visionary leadership of Herb Kelleher, consistently produced amazing financial results, year after year for decades. And their essentialist approach was absolutely central to that unprecedented success.
I remember reading about their almost audacious, deliberate trade-offs. While other airlines were trying to be everything to everyone, flying everywhere, meals, assigned seats, first class.
Southwest went the complete opposite direction. They focused relentlessly on a simple, low-cost model. Right. Only point-to-point flights, no meals served, no assigned seats, only coach class. And these weren't accidental choices. They were meticulously designed to keep costs down and turn those planes around faster than anyone else in the industry.
Kelleher had that insight.
His insight was profound and unwavering. He famously said, you have to look at every opportunity and say, well, no, we're not going to do 1,000 different things that really won't contribute much to the end result we are trying to achieve.
And people thought they were crazy at first.
Oh, absolutely. Predictably, Southwest was lambasted by critics early on. They couldn't fathom how such a bare-bones approach could possibly succeed. Who would want to fly an airline with limited destinations and no meals, no matter how cheap?
They scoffed.
But they were wrong.
Spectacularly wrong. After just a few years, Southwest's soaring profits and incredibly loyal customer base proved the critics wrong. Their clarity of purpose allowed them to absolutely dominate their niche. And this success, as often happens, led competitors to try and imitate them, but often with disastrous results. The book uses this concept from Harvard Business School professor Michelle Porter, right? Straddling.
That's the one. Straddling, as Porter defines it, means trying to adopt a competitor's strategy while simultaneously clinging to your existing one. It's trying to have your cake and eat it too, basically. And it almost always ends in failure.
And Continental Airlines tried this.
Continental is the prime example with their ill-fated Continental Light experiment. They attempted to mimic Southwest by lowering fares, removing meals, stopping first class, increasing flight frequency.
Didn't like Southwest.
On the surface, yes. But because they still clung to their legacy business model, maintaining their full-service hubs, their existing fleet, their complex reservation systems, they simply lacked Southwest's underlying operational efficiencies to genuinely compete on price. They tried to be both a low-cost carrier and a full-service airline simultaneously.
Which just doesn't work.
Exactly. And because they couldn't truly compete on price while maintaining their previous service levels, they were forced to skimp in other ways, cutting corners and compromising service quality in areas that weren't part of a coherent, deliberate strategy.
Unlike Southwest's choices.
Right. Southwest made conscious, deliberate trade-offs that reinforced their core strategy. Continental, in contrast, was forced to sacrifice things around the margins that weren't part of a unified vision. And that's precisely why Porter states, a strategic position is not sustainable unless there are trade-offs with other positions. By trying to operate with two incompatible strategies, they completely undermine their competitiveness.
And the consequences were bad.
Brutal and swift. Continental Light lost hundreds of millions of dollars, planes were chronically delayed, and according to Porter, late flights and cancellations generated 1,000 complaints a day. The CEO eventually lost his job. The moral of the story is undeniable. Ignoring the reality of trade-offs is a terrible strategy for organizations. And it turns out it's an equally terrible and often personally devastating strategy for people as well.
It really raises an important question for us personally. Have you ever known someone, maybe it's even you, who is always trying to fit just one more thing in?
Oh, constantly.
They know they have exactly 10 minutes to get to a meeting that takes 10 minutes to walk to, but they still decide to sit down and answer a couple of emails first, totally convinced they can make it up somehow.
Or they agree to take on a massive new report due by Friday, despite already having another huge deadline that very same day. I'll manage.
Exactly. Or the person who promises to swing by a cousin's birthday party across town while simultaneously having tickets to a sold-out show at the exact same time, genuinely believing, I can do both, I'll just pop in and out.
But this logic is fundamentally flawed, isn't it? Inevitably, they're late, they miss deadlines, they do shoddy work, or they miss one of the events entirely, which just leads to guilt and stress.
The reality bites.
The reality is saying yes to any opportunity, by definition, requires saying no to several others. We either proactively make those hard, conscious choices for ourselves, or we passively allow others, our colleagues, our boss, our customers, societal expectations to decide for us by default. It's a choice we make, whether we realize it or not.
There's a powerful and frankly heartbreaking example of this in the book, isn't there? Erin Callan, the former CFO of Lehman Brothers.
Yes, her story is incredibly poignant. She shared in an op-ed for the New York Times how her devotion to her demanding job just crept in over time. She didn't start out wanting to devote her entire life to work. It was this gradual, almost imperceptible erosion of her boundaries.
How did it happen?
She wrote that each year that went by, slight modifications became the new normal. First, it was maybe just a half hour on Sunday to organize emails, then a few hours, then suddenly it was all day, every Sunday. Her personal boundaries, her time for herself and loved ones just sort of slipped away.
And she rationalized it.
Constantly. Just for now, she'd tell herself, just until this project is done. But as she painfully concluded, looking back, work was all that was left. Her story vividly demonstrates that crucial truth. We have to make these hard choices ourselves, or they absolutely will be made for us by default, often with potentially devastating consequences to our well-being and our relationships. It's a slow bleed, often unnoticed until it's way too late.
And it's not just in these high-stakes careers at global financial institutions, though obviously the pressures there are immense. The book offers more personal, everyday examples, too.
It does. Like the parents McKeown met, who were on their way to visit their son at Harvard. They shared their deliberate strategy for his success.
What was it?
They explained, we had him try out a lot of different things, but as soon as it became clear an activity was not going to be his big thing, it wasn't resonating, it wasn't a passion, or maybe he wasn't excelling, we discussed it together and took him out of it.
Wow, that's countercultural.
Very. They had a clear, long-term goal for their son's development, and they made strategic, sometimes difficult trade-offs to achieve it. They didn't just let him drift into a million activities simply because he could.
And there was another one about marriage.
Yes, another poignant example is a couple with what McKeown describes as an amazing marriage. They shared their secret to such a strong bond. They made a conscious decision decades ago not to join any clubs, whether it was a local lodge, book clubs, even a casual sports league.
Why not?
It wasn't that they had zero interest. It was simply the trade-off they deliberately made to prioritize spending that time with their children. And over the years, that consistent, dedicated time together meant their children grew up to become their best friends. A sacrifice they felt was profoundly well worth it.
So essentialists don't shy away from trade-offs.
Not at all. They see them as an inherent, unavoidable, and ultimately empowering part of life. They embrace them as opportunities for clarity, not as problems to be avoided.
Okay, so once you've embraced that essentialist mindset and you understand the absolute necessity of making deliberate trade-offs, the next crucial step seems to be creating the necessary space for what truly matters.
Yes, space. Critical.
And this often starts with something as fundamental and yet as challenging in our always-on world as solitude.
Indeed. It's about creating dedicated space to concentrate, to think deeply, and importantly, to read. The book describes this extreme but telling example of an executive who was so constantly bombarded and distracted. Twitter, Gmail, Facebook, multiple IMs.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects.
Yeah.
He resorted to truly desperate measures. First, he tried having his assistant physically pull all the internet cables from his computer.
Wow.
When that wasn't enough, he actually gave his phone away to his assistant and went to a motel with absolutely no internet access for 8 consecutive weeks just to complete one single major project.
That's a powerful and honestly kind of sad illustration of just how desperate some highly successful people are becoming to find even a sliver of focused, uninterrupted time.
It really speaks to the insidious nature of constant digital distraction, doesn't it?
It truly does. But the good news is it doesn't always have to be quite so extreme, right?
Thankfully, no. We can take inspiration from figures like Bill Gates, who famously takes a Think Week twice a year. He did this even through the height of Microsoft's frantic expansion.
Really? Even then?
Even then, secluding himself for an entire week to do nothing but read articles. His personal record is supposedly a staggering 112 articles in 1 week, and books, study emerging technologies, and just think deeply about the bigger picture and future strategy.
And he still does it.
He still faithfully adheres to this practice for his philanthropic foundation today. It's clearly essential to him.
That's incredible discipline and foresight. But for those of us who can't exactly disappear for a whole week twice a year,
Which is most of us.
the book offers a practical, much more achievable tip, what McKeown calls mini think weeks. His suggestion is deceptively simple. Instead of immediately checking email or social media the moment you wake up, which is so tempting, spend the first 20 minutes of your day reading something from classic literature or maybe a thought-provoking nonfiction book.
Ah, interesting. Instead of reacting, start with something substantial.
Exactly. This simple practice, if you do it consistently, does several powerful things. It centers your day before the noise of external demands can derail you. It broadens your perspective, exposing you to ideas and themes that are essential enough to have withstood the test of time, unlike, the fleeting trends of the day.
And it cultivates focus right from the start.
Precisely. It builds that muscle. Making this space for concentrated thought and deep reading isn't some luxury for the elite. The book argues it's an essential activity for achieving clarity, fostering innovation, and making truly high-level contributions in any field. It's basically an investment in your mental capital.
I like that, investing in mental capital.
Beyond just creating physical and mental space, Essentialism teaches us how to truly see what really matters, how to identify the core message amidst all the noise. The book illustrates this beautifully through the story of Nora Ephron.
Ah, the brilliant writer and director.
Yeah.
Sleepless in Seattle, When Harry Met Sally.
Exactly. Her keen skill in capturing the essence of a story and stripping away the extraneous stuff was honed early in her life as a journalist. And she learned this profound lesson in high school that apparently stuck with her for life.
Okay, tell me.
Her Journalism 101 teacher, a guy named Charlie Sims, gave the class a news story and challenged them to write the lead paragraph, summarize the who, what, when, why as succinctly as possible.
Standard journalism exercise.
Right. So all the aspiring young journalists focused on the obvious facts.
Yeah.
The people involved, the dates, the locations. They diligently handed in their leads, totally certain they had captured the core information. But Sims told them they were all completely wrong. He paused for dramatic effect, then revealed the true lead to the story, the actual essential point. There will be no school Thursday.
Oh, that was the real news.
Exactly. This was a revelation for Ephron. She realized in that moment that journalism wasn't just about regurgitating facts. It was about figuring out the point.
Why it mattered.
Precisely. It wasn't enough to know the who, what, when, and where. You had to understand what it meant and, crucially, why it mattered. She said this taught her something that works just as well in life as it does in journalism. In every set of facts, every situation, something truly essential is hidden, and the fundamental skill is discovering what that really is, cutting through the clutter.
That's a perfect lead-in to another story in the book, the tragic story of Eastern Airlines Flight 401.
Oh, right. The crash in the Everglades.
Yes. December 29th, 1972. The flight crashed, killing over 100 passengers. And when investigators arrived, they were shocked to find the plane itself was in perfect working condition. So what on earth went wrong? It sounds like something out of a chilling mystery novel.
What was it?
It's a chilling reminder of how easy it is to lose sight of the vital few. During the descent, the first officer noticed that a tiny green light, the one indicating the landing gear was down and locked, hadn't illuminated.
Oh.
Now, the gear was actually locked. The light itself was faulty, just a minor electrical issue. But while the entire cockpit crew became hyper-focused on this single, tiny, faulty indicator light, completely distracted by a non-essential detail, they tragically failed to notice that the autopilot had been accidentally deactivated.
Oh, no.
And the plane was slowly, imperceptibly losing altitude. They were fixated on the problem with the light, asking, is it the bulb? Is it the circuit? While the critical, essential information of the plane's altitude just slipped from their awareness.
So the nose gear light wasn't the real problem at all. Their hyper-focus on a minor issue and losing sight of the big picture was the fatal flaw. They were majoring in minor activities, in the most tragic sense possible.
Exactly. And it's such a powerful metaphor for our own lives, isn't it? We can get so caught up in the trivial details, the faulty indicator light in our day-to-day, that we lose sight of our overall trajectory, our altitude, what truly matters.
So how do we avoid that?
Well, the idea is to become a journalist of your own life, forcing yourself to step back from that kind of hyper-focus and see the big picture. And the book offers practical tools for gaining this clarity. One is journaling, but with an essentialist twist. Less, but better.
How does that work?
Instead of feeling the pressure to write pages and pages every day, which can be daunting and often leads to just abandoning the habit altogether, McKeown suggests writing less than you feel like writing.
Interesting. Just a little bit.
Just enough to capture the essential thoughts and make it a consistent daily habit. It's about consistency over quantity, making it sustainable.
Okay. What else?
He also recommends role play, a trick Nora Ephron herself apparently used regularly in her writing. Put yourself in the shoes of all the main players in a situation or a story. Try to understand their motives, their reasoning, their points of view.
To see it from different angles.
Exactly. This simple act can completely shift your perspective and help you find fresh insights that you'd otherwise miss when you're only viewing things from your own limited lens.
And finally, there was something about clarifying the question.
Yes. It's like watching a skilled politician brilliantly evade a hard question. We often do this in our own lives, giving vague answers or avoiding directly addressing the core issue. It's a subtle form of non-essentialism, really.
How so?
Eli Cohen, a senior VP at Salesforce.com, experienced this firsthand in a business simulation. His 6-person team was stuck in what he described as a sprawling, undisciplined debate that was going absolutely nowhere because no one had truly clarified the fundamental question they were trying to answer.
Just talking past each other.
Totally. The coach had to repeatedly interrupt and ask pointedly, "What question are you trying to answer?" over and over again, just to get them to focus. This highlights the critical importance of avoiding vagueness and making sure everyone is focused on solving the right problem, not just any problem. Clarity of question leads to clarity of purpose.
Okay, so we've talked about creating space to think and cultivating the clarity to see what truly matters. Next, the book argues for something that might sound, well, counterintuitive to our modern, productivity-obsessed minds, the essential role of play.
Ah, yes, play. It absolutely does. The common misconception is that play is trivial, childish, a mere distraction, something only for children, certainly not for serious adults or professionals.
Yeah, it's definitely the vibe.
But consider this, the very word school is derived from the Greek school, which literally means leisure.
No way, leisure.
Yes. Our modern school system, which emerged largely from the Industrial Revolution, was designed primarily for efficiency, to produce compliant factory workers. And it effectively stripped away that concept of leisure and play. As Sir Ken Robinson famously observed, this system can actually kill creativity instead of fueling it through playful exploration.
And this idea that play is trivial, that it's only for kids, sadly follows us right into adulthood and the workplace, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Corporations, which often took inspiration from military structures, fostered hierarchy and efficiency, not spontaneity or playfulness.
Yeah.
We're taught to be serious, to work hard, to be productive every single second.
So how does McKeown define play?
Right. He offers a broader, more essentialist definition. He describes it as anything we do simply for the joy of doing rather than as a means to an end.
Just for fun.
Exactly. Whether it's flying a kite, getting lost in a piece of music, throwing a baseball, or simply doodling the purpose, is the pure delight of the activity itself, not some external outcome. And he argues convincingly that play is absolutely essential in numerous ways. He references Stuart Brown, the founder of the National Institute for Play.
What did Brown find?
Brown has dedicated his life to studying the profound impact of play, having analyzed something like 6,000 play histories. And his conclusion is truly compelling. Play has the power to significantly improve everything, from personal health to relationships to education to organizations' ability to innovate.
Wow. Everything.
Pretty much, he states unequivocally, play leads to brain plasticity, adaptability, and creativity. It's not just a nice to have, it's a fundamental requirement for human flourishing and ingenuity.
It really challenges that play is trivial logic that's so ingrained in us.
It truly does. Think about how many companies now integrate things like, I don't know, a Staples Easy button on someone's desk, or a framed children's book illustration in an office, or even those ping pong tables in tech company break rooms.
Right. The fun stuff.
These efforts, seemingly small and sometimes dismissed as frivolous, actually celebrate play as a vital driver of creativity, exploration, and problem solving. The core message here is that play doesn't just help us explore what's essential or make us more productive. It is essential in and of itself, a non-negotiable human need.
So how do we reconnect with it if we've lost touch?
Brown suggests we actively mine our past play memories from childhood. What did you love to do as a kid, purely for the joy of it? And then deliberately find ways to recreate those kinds of experiences in your adult life.
Interesting. Okay, speaking of things we often dismiss as non-essential, or maybe even as a sign of laziness in our always-on culture, the book makes an incredibly powerful case for sleep.
Sleep. Yes. Mahatma Gandhi famously said, "Each night when I go to sleep, I die, and the next morning when I wake up, I am reborn." He highlights the profound, almost spiritual power of regeneration that sleep offers.
Yet, despite its undeniable importance, we constantly neglect it, almost wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor sometimes.
It's crazy, isn't it? The book tells the truly sobering story of Jeff, a textbook overachiever with this immense, admirable desire to make a difference in the world. At 36, he was at the absolute pinnacle of his career.
What was he doing?
He served on the board of Kiva, was named Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, recognized as a young global leader, and was the CEO of a global microcredit organization reaching over 12 million families. He was, by any measure, a phenomenal success.
Wow. Impressive,
But his pace was utterly unsustainable. He was traveling a grueling 60 to 70% of the time, typically sleeping only 4 to 6 hours a night. He was just running on fumes, fueled by ambition and a sense of mission, but completely denying his body's fundamental needs.
It caught up with him.
Oh, big time. At the tender age of 36, his health started to catastrophically collapse. He experienced panic attacks that had no underlying anxiety. His internal organs began shutting down. His heart rate became terrifyingly erratic. It became physically painful for him to even stand up straight. He couldn't digest food properly, and he would black out if he stood up too quickly.
That sounds terrifying.
He was, as he recounts, living in this constant state of internal denial, always telling himself he'd finally slow down after the next deal or after this next trip. He simply didn't want to face the incredibly difficult trade-offs that his body was screaming for him to make.
And it impacted his work.
Hugely. He got so bad that he was routinely forced to cancel critical meetings or completely bomb speeches because his brain was so cloudy he couldn't think clearly. Eventually, his doctor gave him this stark ultimatum: either go on medication for the rest of his life to manage these symptoms, or completely disengage from everything for 1 to 2 years to physically recover.
1 to 2 years.
Years. Jeff, still in denial, initially resisted, boastfully telling the doctor he'd take a couple of months off and be back to full form. But his body had other plans. He totally crashed.
Oh, wow.
He ended up sleeping 14 hours per night and was basically non-functional, utterly exhausted, for 6 straight weeks. The forced recovery ultimately led him to resign from all his prestigious boards in his company. It's a devastating, real-world example of the catastrophic consequences of ignoring the utterly essential need for rest and regeneration. Our bodies and minds simply aren't designed to run indefinitely without adequate sleep.
And this isn't just about avoiding burnout or catastrophic health issues, right? There's that study about violinists.
Yes. Anders Ericsson's famous study, the one that gave rise to the popular 10,000-hour rule for mastering a skill. Everyone knows the finding that the best violinists practiced more hours than the merely good ones.
Right. Practice makes perfect.
But what's less known, and arguably far more important from that very same study, is that the second most important factor differentiating the elite violinists from the merely good ones was actually sleep.
Really? Sleep.
Yes. The best violinists, on average, slept 8.6 hours per night. That's about an hour more than the average American. And, crucially, they also napped an average of 2.8 hours per week, which is 2 hours more than the average.
So while they did practice more hours overall,
They also got significantly more out of those practice hours because they were better rested. Their sleep allowed them to regenerate both physically and mentally, enabling them to practice with far greater concentration, efficiency, and effectiveness. It wasn't just about the quantity of practice, but the quality, which was directly supported by sufficient sleep.
that's a crucial insight.
It really is. A Harvard Business Review article even goes so far as to call it sleep deficit, the performance killer. This isn't just hyperbole. Sleep is not a luxury, it's not a sign of weakness, and it's certainly not something you can just catch up on indefinitely over the weekend. It is a vital asset for peak cognitive performance, sustained concentration, optimal creativity, and sound decision-making. Protecting this asset, prioritizing it, is deeply, fundamentally essentialist.
Okay, so once we understand the essentialist mindset and we start making space for what truly matters, including sleep, how do we actually do it? How do we implement this philosophy in our daily lives? The next section of the book seems to be all about disciplined execution, making the essentialist path feel almost effortless.
Right, putting it into practice.
And it starts with perhaps one of the hardest things for many of us, the courage to uncommit.
Oof. Yes. This really hits home for a lot of people, myself included. The book uses the striking example of the Concorde jet.
Supersonic plane.
That's the one. It was, without a doubt, an engineering marvel, capable of flying from London to New York in under 3 hours, breaking the sound barrier. But it was also, from a financial perspective, an extraordinary, colossal failure. It lost money hand over fist.
But they kept flying it for years.
For decades. And the British and French governments, the project's original backers, continued to pour billions into it. And that's where sunk cost bias comes into play, a really powerful psychological phenomenon. This is the ingrained human tendency to continue investing time, money, or energy into something you know, intellectually, is losing proposition, simply because costs have already been incurred and cannot be recouped.
You can't get the money back, so you keep going.
Exactly. The more you've already invested, the harder it is to let go. To admit you might have made a mistake. You think, I've come this far, I can't possibly quit now.
And the Concorde costs were huge.
The sunk costs were already in the realm of $1 billion. And the more money poured in, the harder it became politically and emotionally to walk away, to admit defeat. But individuals are equally, if not more, vulnerable to this bias.
How does it show up for us?
Well, it explains why we'll sit through a truly terrible movie, even though we're bored out of our minds, simply because we paid for the ticket. Or why we might endlessly renovate a home that's clearly a money pit. Or wait interminably for a bus that never seems to come.
Or stay in bad situations.
Exactly. It explains why people stay in toxic relationships or dead-end careers, clinging to the investment they've already made in terms of time and emotion. And it even explains that bizarre story of the man, Henry Gribbohm, who reportedly spent $2,600 at a carnival game, trying desperately to win an Xbox Connect.
$2,600 on a carnival game.
Yes. He said, you just get caught up in the whole, I've got to win my money back, but it didn't turn out that way. The more he invested, the harder it was to walk away.
So the nonessentialist, trapped by this bias, asks, why stop now when I've already invested so much? They think, if I just keep trying, I can make this work. And they utterly despise admitting mistakes or cutting their losses.
But the essentialist approaches this from a completely different angle. They ask themselves, if I weren't already invested in this project or this path, how much would I invest in it now?
That's a good question.
Or perhaps even more powerfully, what else could I do with this time, this money, or this energy if I pulled the plug right now? They are comfortable, maybe even eager, with the idea of cutting losses and redirecting their precious resources to something truly vital. It's actually a really liberating perspective when you adopt it.
So how do you actually do it? Uncommit. It sounds great in theory, but that emotional pull of sunk costs is immense.
It really is. The book offers some practical techniques to help you actually put this into practice. One is to pretend you don't own it yet.
What does that mean?
Instead of asking yourself, how much do I value this item? Or how will I feel if I miss out on this opportunity? You reframe the question entirely. You ask, if I didn't currently have this opportunity or this item, how much would I be willing to sacrifice to obtain it right now? Or apply it to projects. If I wasn't already involved in this project, how hard would I work to get on it? This helps you bypass the emotional pull of loss aversion and that fear of missing out FOMO by forcing a more objective, present-day evaluation of its true worth. It asks you to restart with a blank slate, free from those past commitments.
That makes so much sense. It forces you to evaluate things on their current merit, not just on past investment. Another intriguing technique mentioned is to run a reverse pilot. That sounds like something from a business strategy playbook.
It is, and it borrows from the concept of prototyping in business, where you test an idea on a small scale to minimize risk before you go all in. In a reverse pilot, you do the opposite. You test whether removing an initiative, an activity, or even a responsibility actually has a negative impact.
So you take something away and see what happens?
Exactly. Daniel Chaparro, a director at LinkedIn, apparently uses this to reduce risk and cut non-essentials. Instead of always asking, what new things should we add? He asks, what if we just stopped doing X? Would anyone even notice? If no one notices or the impact is negligible, it was probably non-essential. It's a low-risk way to identify what truly adds value by seeing what happens when it's gone.
That's brilliant. Okay, the next crucial step in disciplined execution is what the book calls the invisible art of editing. This connects to the Oscars.
Yes. At the Academy Awards, everyone focuses on Best Picture, and rightly so. But what most people don't realize is a truly strong correlation between Best Film Editing and Best Picture. Since 1981, not a single film has won Best Picture without at least being nominated for Best Film Editing.
Wow.
And get this, in about 2/3 of the cases, the movie that actually won Best Editing went on to win Best Picture.
So editing is key.
It isn't just a coincidence. It highlights that the invisible art of editing, which fundamentally involves removing what isn't essential, stripping away scenes, dialogue, even entire plot lines that don't serve the core story, is absolutely crucial for achieving greatness. The true essence and power of a great film, much like anything great, often comes from what is painstakingly, courageously left out. It's a process of brutal, deliberate removal for clarity.
And this applies profoundly to personal interactions and professional relationships too, right? There's the story of Jin Young.
Yes, Jin Young, a rising professional who always habitually said yes to her manager, Hyori, even when those extra demands caused immense turmoil and stress in her personal life. It was just her pattern.
Sacrificing herself.
Totally. But this one time, Hyori asked her to complete an additional seemingly urgent project right before a board meeting, and something just shifted in Jin Young. Instead of her usual hesitant yes, she didn't hesitate this time.
What did she do?
She looked Hyori straight in the eye and simply said no. She didn't apologize profusely or over-justify. She simply stated with quiet conviction, I have planned for this time, I have worked hard for it, and I deserve to have it, guilt-free.
Wow. How did that go down?
And then, something truly shocking happened. Everyone else on the team, witnessing her courage, followed suit and also said no to additional non-essential work that was being piled on. It highlights the incredible ripple effect and power of setting clear, firm boundaries. One brave no can empower many others.
Which leads us beautifully to the idea of crafting social contracts. The author describes a personal experience of being paired with a new colleague who approached projects in a completely opposite way from him. Most people predicted fireworks, right? An inevitable clash.
Sounds like trouble.
But their working relationship was incredibly harmonious and productive.
Oh, what was the secret?
The secret was that McKeown proactively laid out his priorities, his working style, and what extra work he would and wouldn't take on at the very beginning of their collaboration. They essentially worked through a kind of social contract, an upfront agreement.
Exactly. An upfront, explicit understanding of what they were both really trying to achieve, what their individual boundaries were, and how they would communicate. This prevented countless wasted hours, burdensome requests, and unnecessary distractions down the line, allowing both individuals to focus their energy and make their highest level of contribution to the project. It's all about proactive boundary setting rather than reactive resentment.
And finally, to make execution feel truly effortless, the book strongly recommends adding buffers. This addresses what psychologists call the planning fallacy.
Ah, yes. Our tendency to underestimate how long things take.
Our consistent irrational tendency. A fascinating study found that if people estimated task completion anonymously, they were no longer guilty of this fallacy.
Really? So we know better.
It implies that we often know, deep down, that we probably can't do things in a given time frame, but we're afraid to admit it to others, or maybe even to ourselves.
And the result is constant lateness, missed deadlines, rushing, and just immense frustration for everyone involved.
So what's the simple essentialist solution?
Add a 50% buffer to your time estimates.
50%? That seems like a lot.
It might seem like it, but think about it. If you think a call will take an hour, block off an hour and a half. If you estimate it will take 10 minutes to get your child to soccer practice, leave 15 minutes before. Not only does this relieve the pervasive stress of being late and rushing, but if the task does happen to be faster than you expected,
You get bonus time.
that extra time feels like a delightful bonus, a little gift of reclaimed time. It completely changes your entire relationship with time and deadlines.
Okay, another incredibly powerful execution strategy is embracing the momentum of small wins. We often fall into that trap of grand, ambitious beginnings that are simply unsustainable, right? And then we flame out quickly.
The New Year's resolution effect.
Totally. Instead, the wisdom here is to start small, consistently, and build momentum. As Henry B. Eyring so eloquently wrote, my experience has taught me this about how people and organizations improve. The best place to look is for small changes we could make in the things we do often. There's power in steadiness and repetition.
I love that. Power in steadiness and repetition. McKeown actually applied this directly to writing the book itself. In the exploratory mode before writing full chapters, he'd share a short idea on Twitter, like a minimal viable product, an MVP for ideas.
Okay.
If it resonated, if people engaged with it, he'd then expand it into a blog piece, maybe for Harvard Business Review. This iterative process, requiring very little initial effort, helped him validate which ideas truly resonated and had the highest relevancy before he invested significant time in full-blown writing.
That's smart. It's a bit like Pixar's brilliant movie-making process, isn't it?
Exactly. They don't jump straight to expensive full animation. They start with story reels, these rough sketch-like animations, and they iterate constantly, making changes, catching costly mistakes early, before they become astronomically expensive to fix later on. Small, consistent iterations prevent massive, costly reworks.
And there are practical hacks we can apply to almost anything, right?
Absolutely. For a big speech or presentation, instead of procrastinating for weeks, the book suggests simply opening a file 6 months before and spending just 4 minutes putting down initial ideas, then close it. Just start. That's it.
Break the inertia.
Exactly. Or for meetings, a colleague McKeown mentions takes just 15 seconds to type the main objectives before scheduling it. This ensures she knows what she needs to prepare for and what the meeting's essential purpose actually is. Tiny investment, big clarity payoff.
And to keep that momentum going, to make sure those small wins actually build into something significant, the book says you need to visually reward your progress.
Ah, the visual cues.
Yeah.
Remember those school thermometers for fundraisers where you could see the donations climbing?
Yeah.
Or maybe star charts for good behavior when you were a kid?
Yeah, they're motivating.
Seeing visible progress, no matter how small the step seems, is incredibly powerful and motivating for the human brain. It taps into something fundamental.
So track your progress visually.
Yes, by starting small, by focusing on those minimal viable actions, and by visually rewarding progress, you actually end up achieving far more than you would with those big, lofty, often impossible goals that just lead to burnout. And the positive reinforcement from seeing that progress means you reap more enjoyment and satisfaction from the process itself, creating this virtuous cycle of sustained effort.
Okay, the final piece of disciplined execution, according to McKeown, is deeply understanding and then overhauling your triggers for lasting habits. We all have habits we desperately want to change, right?
Oh yeah, eating less junk food, wasting less time on social media, worrying less, the list goes on.
But it's disturbingly hard sometimes. There's this powerful, almost gravitational pull back to those old, comfortable patterns, even when we know they don't serve us.
It's the invisible force that keeps us stuck. Charles Duhigg, the brilliant author of The Power of Habit, explains that every habit, whether it's good or bad, is made up of 3 fundamental components. It forms what he calls the habit loop.
Okay, what are the 3 parts?
The first component is the cue. This is the trigger, the signal that tells your brain to go into automatic mode. It could be a time of day, a specific location, an emotion you're feeling, or even just the presence of other people.
The thing that sets it off.
Exactly. Then there's the routine. This is the behavior itself, the action you take in response to the cue. It can be physical, like biting your nails, mental, like immediately reaching for your phone when you feel bored, or emotional, like a surge of worry when faced with uncertainty.
And the third part.
And finally, there's the reward. This is the benefit your brain gets from completing the routine. It could be a feeling of satisfaction, maybe a hit of dopamine, a release from discomfort, or simply the avoidance of something unpleasant. The reward is what helps your brain decide if this particular habit is worth remembering and repeating.
So it's a constant loop. Cue, routine, reward. Cue, routine, reward.
Exactly. And over time, as you repeat it, that loop becomes incredibly automatic, almost unconscious. You don't even think about it anymore. You just do it.
So how does understanding this help us change habits?
Precisely. The power of this understanding is that to truly change a habit, you don't necessarily have to eliminate the cue or even the reward. Instead, you need to deeply understand its specific cue and its specific reward, and then consciously, intentionally change the routine that connects them.
Replace the routine.
Yes. For example, if your cue is feeling stressed, cue, and your reward is feeling comfort, reward, instead of reaching for junk food, the old routine, you could consciously choose to take a short walk or practice deep breathing, a new, healthier routine that still provides that desired sense of comfort. This foundational understanding is absolutely key to making lasting, effortless changes that actually stick.
This brings us then to the ultimate goal, the culmination of essentialism. Living a life that truly matters, a life lived fully present in the now. It's about transcending that constant pull of past regrets and future anxieties.
Getting out of your head.
Exactly. The ancient Greeks, with their profound wisdom, actually had two distinct words for time, and understanding them is crucial here.
Okay, what are they?
The first was chronos. This is the quantitative, literal, ticking clock time, chronological time, the kind we measure in minutes, hours, days. It's often personified as an elderly, gray-haired man steadily moving forward. This is the time we relentlessly try to manage efficiently, to pack more into. It's the time we often feel like we're rushing through.
Okay, chronos.
Right.
What's the other one?
The second was kairos. This is qualitative time, the opportune moment, the right time, the perfect moment. It's more of a feeling, an experience. You experience kairos only when you are fully present in the moment, when you are utterly immersed and engaged in the here and now. It's when time seems to stretch or even disappear because you're completely focused.
Like being in the zone, flow state.
Exactly like that. The problem for many of us, particularly in our modern hyper-driven world, is that we get trapped overwhelmingly in chronos. We spend our precious present moments reliving past mistakes, playing them over and over like a broken video, dissecting every wrong turn.
Or worrying about the future.
Or, conversely, we spend our time and energy worrying incessantly about the future, mentally preparing for the next meeting, the next assignment, the next chapter of our lives, rather than being fully present and engaged in the current one.
It's incredibly natural, isn't it? Almost an evolutionary hardwiring to obsess or feel stress about what's ahead or regret what's behind.
It is. Yet, every single second spent dwelling on a past or future moment is a second stolen from what is truly important and actionable in the here and now. The ultimate goal of essentialism is to cultivate and live in kairos, to truly be present.
So how do we practically achieve this state of being in the now, this elusive kairos? It sounds great, but how do you do it?
McKeown offers simple yet profoundly effective techniques. First, his golden question: what is most important right now?
Right now.
Right now. He describes a time after teaching a full day on essentialism, he returned to his hotel room and felt this overwhelming wave of competing demands pulling him in a million directions. Checking email, reading a book, prepping for future talks, recording ideas, just a deluge.
The familiar feeling of overwhelm.
Totally. Leading to that familiar spike of anxiety. So he stopped. He recounts actually kneeling down, closing his eyes, and simply asking himself, what's important now?
What was the answer?
He realized, with surprising clarity, that until he knew what was important right now, the most important thing right now was simply to figure out what was important right now.
Huh. That sounds circular, but it's actually quite profound in its simplicity.
It really is. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, the advice is:
stop. Take a deep breath. Get present in the moment and simply ask yourself what is most important this very second. Not tomorrow or even an hour from now, but this very second.
And if you're not sure?
If you're not sure, make a quick list of everything vying for your attention and ruthlessly cross off anything that is not important right now. This immediate, decisive action helps clear that mental clutter.
Okay, so identify the immediate priority. Then what?
Then, once you've identified that one essential thing for the present moment, the next step is to get the future out of your head.
How do you do that?
After identifying what's important now, you list those other essential ideas or future tasks, the ones that are important but not urgent this very second, on another page of your journal or in a separate note or a task list. Get them out of your brain and onto paper.
Exactly. This serves two vital purposes. First, it ensures you won't forget about those ideas that might be useful later, preventing that nagging anxiety that you might miss something important. And second, it immediately alleviates the stressful, distracting feeling that you need to act on them right this second. It clears your mental space, allowing you to focus fully and completely on what is directly in front of you, bringing you into that state of kairos.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Focus on the now, capture the future elsewhere.
When you combine all these essentialist principles, discerning, choosing, trading off, making space, executing with discipline, and being present, you begin to see the profound and enduring legacy of essentialism, echoed throughout history by figures who lived lives of extraordinary contribution and deep meaning.
Like who?
Take Mahatma Gandhi, for instance. He famously underwent this lifelong process he called reducing himself to zero. He dressed simply in homespun cloth, deliberately spent 3 years not reading newspapers because he felt they added non-essential confusion and noise to his mind, and dedicated 35 years to experimenting with simplifying his diet.
Wow. Discipline.
Incredible discipline. He famously spent a day each week in complete silence, a deliberate practice of solitude. When he died, he apparently owned fewer than 10 personal items.
Incredible simplicity.
And of course, he devoted his entire life to helping India gain independence, intentionally never holding a political position, yet becoming revered as the father of the nation. Albert Einstein, reflecting on Gandhi's life, said something like, "Generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth." That's a life that truly mattered, lived as a profound essentialist.
And he's far from alone in that, is he? We see this philosophy reflected in diverse figures, both religious and secular, throughout history.
Absolutely. Gautama Buddha left his princely, opulent life in search of enlightenment. Moses abandoned his luxurious life in Egypt to live in the wilderness, where he discovered his essential mission. The Prophet Muhammad lived a remarkably simple life, apparently mending his own shoes and clothes. Think of John the Baptist, living that minimalist existence in the desert.
And others too.
The Quakers, with their testimony of simplicity. Jesus, living his ministry without wealth or political position. Then you have more modern figures who embodied this less but better philosophy. The Dalai Lama and his focus on compassion. Steve Jobs and his relentless pursuit of simplicity in design. Leo Tolstoy's profound spiritual simplicity. Michael Jordan's singular focus on basketball excellence. Warren Buffett's disciplined investment philosophy. Mother Teresa's radical dedication to the poor. And Henry David Thoreau, who famously wrote, "I do believe in simplicity. Simplify the problem of life. Distinguish the necessary and the real." The common thread across all these diverse lives is the incredible power of living with less but better.
McKeown shares his own personal essentialist journey too, doesn't he? The one that ultimately led him to write this transformative book.
He does. After making that difficult decision to quit law school, he was exploring career options, feeling a bit adrift. Then, one day, this profound clarity simply descended upon him. What if I went to Stanford for my graduate work? This feeling of immediate, undeniable clarity was, for him, his essential path.
Just like that, a clear feeling.
Just like that. And what's truly fascinating is how that clarity almost immediately disappeared the moment he even thought of applying elsewhere. He started applications for other programs, other potential paths, but he always stopped, unable to complete them.
So he listened to that feeling.
He made the deliberate, brave decision to concentrate his efforts only on that single Stanford application. And despite the uncertainty of not yet knowing if he'd even be accepted, he felt this unprecedented sense of calm, focus, and control. He applied only to Stanford.
And he got rejected the first time.
He did. But he courageously applied a second time, still only to Stanford. And when he finally received his acceptance offer the second time around, it was clear this was the most vital thing for him to be doing, the truly essential next step.
Wow. That's sticking to your guns.
It was, as he calls it, the quiet personal confirmation of the way of the essentialist. This singular, focused choice ultimately led him to write for the Harvard Business Review, to become a sought-after speaker, and of course, to write this incredibly impactful book. His own life became a testament to the principles he espouses.
The ultimate profound benefit of living this essentialist way, then, seems to be the possibility of living a life without regret.
Yes. The book directly references Bronnieware's incredibly poignant work, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying.
Oh, I know that work. It's heartbreaking.
It includes common regrets like not living true to oneself, working too hard, or not expressing feelings. Essentialism provides a clear, actionable framework for proactively avoiding these common, heartbreaking regrets by living intentionally.
McKeown shares that, for him, understanding The pathetically tiny amount of time we have left of our lives isn't depressing, but surprisingly thrilling.
Thrilling. How so?
This stark awareness of mortality removes the often paralyzing fear of choosing the wrong thing, and instead infuses him with the courage to be unreasonably selective with this precious, finite time. He even mentions a personal habit of visiting cemeteries around the world to keep his own mortality front and center.
Wow, that's intense. A constant reminder.
A constant reminder to live with purpose and intentionality.
And finally, living essentialism creates undeniable clarity and accountability, especially in leadership roles.
How does that work?
A non-essentialist leader who pursues many items simultaneously without clear prioritization often unintentionally trains their team to expect no real follow-up. Teams learn subtly that there are no significant repercussions for failing or for prioritizing ease over what's truly important. It creates a culture of diffuse responsibility and a lack of true progress.
Whereas an essentialist leader
drives a powerful, essential intent. This intent isn't vague or just aspirational. It is concrete, inspiring, and most importantly, it clearly answers the question, how will we know when we have succeeded?
Like the Brad Pitt example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
McKeown gives the incredible example of Brad Pitt's Make It Right Foundation, which he established after Hurricane Katrina. Their essential intent was crystal clear: to build 150 affordable, green, storm-resistant homes for families living in the lower Ninth Ward.
That's incredibly specific.
That specific, measurable goal absolutely took the air out of the room, apparently. Its concreteness made it real, tangible, and achievable. And its realness, its sheer clarity, made it profoundly inspiring to everyone involved, from donors to volunteers to the families themselves.
It clearly answered that question. How will we know when we have succeeded?
Without a shadow of a doubt. This kind of radical clarity is what essentialist leaders bring. It ensures focused follow-up, drives meaningful progress, and prevents teams from defaulting to ease or just plain busyness over true importance. It's the difference between hoping for success and actually designing for it.
Wow. What an incredible deep dive into Greg McKeown's Essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less. We've really unpacked quite a bit there.
We really have, from understanding that subtle, insidious trap of non-essentialism to embracing the liberating core mindset of less but better.
We've explored the invincible fundamental power of choice, the critical skill of discerning the vital few from the trivial many, and the liberating inevitability of making deliberate, strategic trade-offs.
And we've seen how absolutely crucial it is to create dedicated space for what truly matters, whether that's through intentional solitude, learning to see the big picture like a journalist,
Embracing the profound power of play, or protecting that vital asset we call sleep. Don't forget sleep.
never forget sleep. Then we moved into the practicalities of disciplined execution, cultivating the courage to uncommit, mastering the invisible art of editing.
Building powerful momentum with small, consistent wins, and really overhauling our habit triggers for lasting change.
And ultimately, we connected it all back to the most profound aspiration of essentialism: living a life lived fully in the now, understanding the qualitative, rich nature of Kairos time.
And drawing deep inspiration from countless historical figures who live lives of profound contribution, meaning, and perhaps most importantly, without regret.
The core message really is clear, isn't it? And powerful and universally applicable. Essentialism is not about being passive or just doing nothing.
Not at all. It is about living a life of high contribution and profound meaning by applying deliberate thought, disciplined discernment, and immense courage to pursue only what is truly essential. It's not about doing more. It's about doing less, but better.
And this choice, this essentialist path, is entirely your choice. That realization in itself feels incredibly liberating and empowering, doesn't it?
It really does.
So as you go about your week, we challenge you, the listener, to consider just one area in your life. Maybe it's work, maybe relationships, your personal well-being, or even just your daily habits where you might currently be making sacrifices by default rather than by conscious, deliberate design.
Just find one thing. Take a single small step this week to uncommit from one non-essential activity, no matter how small it seems, and reclaim that moment for something truly vital, something that genuinely aligns with your deepest priorities.
Continue your own deep dive. Use these powerful principles we've discussed today to find and then walk your essential path. Until next time.